I am Vicki Marcus, and I'm the CEO of the La Crosse Area Chamber. And I know you guys are, if you've been on these before, you're used to me giving you some highlights of what we're working on. Honestly, our big discussion point, we had a board meeting yesterday, is the chamber. Our board did vote to support a plan called Back to Business by the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. We'll be talking to you about what that entails, but it's essentially a very analytical approach to reopening. So it takes a look at data, it takes a look at industries and which ones are more likely to have higher risks than others. It looks at what community they're in. So we'll get information out to you as to us signing on to a letter of support there. But the main reasoning behind it is we need some metrics as businesses out there to look towards so that we can plan. And we certainly appreciate the dialing that has happened. We're not going to look at something positive as a negative. However, we need to know what the next notch looks like and the next notch looks like, so all of our businesses can plan and see some light at the end of the tunnel. So that's one of the big things. An exciting piece, again, small, but we'll take what we can get. I did send a letter to the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation over the weekend saying, this was before the latest notch got open or turned of the dial, and asked, because of our low rates of spread, if we might be able to pilot allowing, for example, gift basket sales, which would have a curbside component to them for pickup, but essentially trying to capitalize on a buy local campaign around Mother's Day. So we're going to be quickly mobilizing around that. The other thing that our chamber has been mindful of is, obviously many of our businesses have a shortfall of funding, but the lag that is happening from the federal level really makes it challenging to know where that gap in financing is going to be. We also know, painfully to say this, but not all of our businesses are going to be emerging from this. If they were struggling before, and honestly, a big decision maker is whether they were able to get the federal funding. We need to make sure that the resources that we have get to those businesses as they are emerging. So one of the things that we're talking about is taking some of the pent up desire by the community to support local, creating a fundraising platform there, and then working to bulk purchase some of the plexiglass shields, some hand sanitizer, again, buying in bulk so we can get it available, but also get better pricing. And then we would take those public dollars and donate those items to the businesses as they are emerging, again, because that's overhead that many businesses did not have before. So those are some of the things that we're working on here at the chamber. Of course, there's some talk of yet another federal stimulus package. I believe that I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen, but as we experienced with the last one, each of these, as they get discussed, become more and more controversial, and there's a little bit more leg there. So we know there's talk of yet another piece. We're waiting to see if that's going to have enough steam to move forward. And then, of course, we're eagerly awaiting whatever the next notch is for the state opening up. I know there's concerns from our members that by having nearby Rochester open up faster than ours, that actually cripples or I shouldn't say cripples, it puts some of our retailers at a disadvantage, because obviously we will have people move to, not move, but travel to Rochester so that they can do some shopping. So those are some of the things that we are looking at here at the chamber, but I wanted to obviously not talk too long because we have a great speaker. So Barb Nick is president and CEO of Dairyland Power Cooperative. They, of course, are very needed during COVID, but they have also had to adapt, just like many businesses, to ensure that the people that are working for them are safe, obviously providing energy for their customer base, and obviously they are impacted by this. One of the things we're learning with COVID is I heard a comment that the only industry that is doing really well are the grocery stores, and every single industry otherwise has been impacted. We see it in our healthcare, which of course we would not think of, but as Barb will talk about Dairyland, how how they have changed and adapting and making sure that our very essential energy is getting through to all of us. So with that, Barb, thank you so much, and take it away from here.
Great, thanks, Vicki. And let me just start by saying thank you to you, everyone at the Chamber, all the members and WMC for working together on trying to save lives and livelihoods. I think we're all trying to do that.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Dairyland. So let me start by just reminding the folks who don't know who Dairyland is, who we are and what we do. You can see on this map our 24 distribution cooperatives that are in mostly Western Wisconsin and then portions of Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. We also serve some municipalities in this region. We have about 550 employees, 3,000 miles of transmission, 300 substations, and we're about 1.4 billion in total assets. So this gives you a flavor for Dairyland. We are a not-for-profit because we are a cooperative, and we're a generation and transmission cooperative, and the members we serve are distribution. So we're almost like two parts of Excel. Excel, as many of you are customers of Excel, they would be distribution, transmission, and generation. And we are at Dairyland, generation and transmission. So tell you a little bit about what we're staying focused on. We want to make sure as a critical business, as an essential employer, that we stick to our knitting, which is keeping the power flowing and lights on. Generally, people don't think about their utilities or don't like to think about their utilities because the only time they really think about us is when they get their bill or when the lights are out. So we are doing our best to be behind the scenes, making sure that we're providing all of our customers, consumers, communities, and actually the whole Eastern interconnection with power and transmission. So that's what we've been spending a lot of our time doing, making sure we do not stub our toe and that we are ready in any kind of emergency or mishap. So as part of our ensuring the reliability, resiliency of power flowing and lights on, we have made sure that we're very responsive to the COVID situation. We've had all of our administrative employees work remote, and we have building access protocols to protect the mission critical employees who have to stay on site or be in our facilities. So how I like to think about it is, as an essential workplace, we don't have requirements to have all of our employees off site, but we're doing our part to flatten the curve while we keep power flowing and lights on. As we do that, we're staying in constant contact, of course, with the Chamber, with WMC, with legislative and governmental officials, as well as our members. But we also have very tight ties to all of our industry peers to ensure that we are synchronized in keeping the power on throughout the entire United States. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we proceed. At Dairyland, we have, as many of you in business have done, stopped all in-person meetings. We have travel restrictions. I don't think I've gone anywhere since the 1st of March. And we are asking our employees who can work remote to work remote. As many of the employees or employers who still have business going, we have to make sure that we have all of our OSHA required equipment, not just in response to COVID, but in response to just our normal operations of our power plants and working out in our line crews. And then, of course, we're making sure we protect our employee health. And in the event that there would be a power outage, we make sure that not only we're available for our own needs, but that we're available for neighboring utilities. And we call that our industry mutual aid. So we're doing those parts to keep safe. And you can see here some pictures of our workforce. And Vicki, I'm going to do a check on just, you can see the entire screen, right? My PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to make sure they're not seeing you and me on my slide. So you see our system operating folks there with the multiple screens. You can see folks in our power plants and our line crews. So in the event of a critical weather event, we want to make sure that those employees are ready to go and that they've been safe, isolated, and that we have both primary and backup locations for our power plant and dispatch individuals. And if for some reason other neighboring utilities need assistance, that we're able to provide it. We're also working on plans to sequester. And what I mean by that is, as you might guess, it's actually if we needed to, if we had groups of our employees who got infected, we would need to sequester groups because these are highly skilled positions and it's 24/7. We would need to sequester them for a week or 2-week shifts and ensure that there's adequate staffing to meet the needs of the reliable and safe and secure electricity. And here's a picture of our system dispatch, so you get a sense for how close our dispatch sits. And again, just making sure that we take the precautions I just mentioned. And then most people have seen line crews out or transmission crews. And in the unfortunate event of a tornado or severe weather, we would make sure that our crews are available to restore power, restore transmission towers, we're preparing for that by making sure they stay safe with split crews. We're ensuring that our employees wipe down any shared tools with very robust cleaning systems. They also have to do self-checks before entering any facility, getting their equipment, or going to the job site. And we, of course, have been working to limit when we can for maintenance or construction, any of our crews. And in the news, you've all heard about cybersecurity and the need for protecting the entire grid from any kind of bad actors that might be attempting to hack the electric system. And of course, during this crisis, we've seen increased activity by bad actors, but we have a very robust and strong industry group that monitors this, and it includes the Department of Energy, the FBI, Homeland Security, and then what we call our electricity information sharing group. So they're all working together to ensure not just the reliability, but the cybersecurity of the grid so that we are not in any way vulnerable or prone to attack during a time that's very, very sensitive for all of us. And then I thought you'd be interested in what we see from customers and how they're using electricity and how that's changed. And what I'd like to do is just demonstrate some things that are going on. This green line that you see here is a projection of what our sales, or we call it customer usage, would be this year, and then now how we've changed our forecast going forward. And you can see that this is from Moody's, and it's an aggregate of all industry, not just Dairyland. And then you can see through the light green line how that has gone down. So your takeaway here is that sales over the long term, customer use of electricity is anticipated to decrease. And what that means for us as a utility, when we're a very highly capital intensive industry, is we're going to have to be more and more diligent. You're always diligent, but even more and more so on any of our fixed cost, because we'll have less units. And when you're capital intensive, that's what drives your cost, as many of our manufacturing and industry folks know. So this is what we see as sales going forward in our industry, something that has been a trend over time. I can go into that more later, Vicki, if you and the group is interested. And then what's that mean about people's habits? So what I'd like to show you here is the black line shows habits of not just people, but industry and commerce, commercial load. You can see early in the morning, industry comes online and ramps up. And then right around 8 o'clock, everyone wakes up, gets ready for school, and then head to the office. And then kids are in school, the day levels off. There's not the combination use. And then around 3 o'clock, which is right around in here, you see industry load go down because factory shifts usually are ending. And then you see this ramp when people go home and there's more activity there, and maybe your commercial loads like restaurants ramp up or retail. And what we've seen in this green line is what's happened recently with COVID. You see a delay and actually a diminishing of the morning peak. And they're saying people are sleeping in later. Now, this is a hypothesis, but if you don't have a commute, you know, it does, even if it's an hour or 15 minutes. And think of large cities like New York. And then, you know, it's like a snow day, load goes down. But then it peaks when people must be more active. It says there evening fun in this publication. So maybe more TV, Netflix, other types of electric use that's going on, and then declines as usual. That's what we see from customers in our sectors as an aggregate. And we just remain very focused behind the scenes, hopefully, on keeping the power flowing and the lights on. We know we're essential. What keeps me awake at night is worrying about what would happen if we lost power at a time of a surge in our healthcare, when the hospitals need us and communities need us. So we're working hard so that you don't ever have to think of us. So with that, Vicki, I'll turn it over to you if you have any questions, or to our audience. Thank you.
Sure. So a housekeeping thing for everyone, if you are on a desktop, that's usually what I look at, there is a chat bubble down below. If you click on that, it looks like a conversation bubble. You can type in a question. We're a small enough group, so you could unmute your mic if you would like to as well. I'm gonna start a couple of questions just because people need time to think. One of the first areas, Barb, that you touched on was communication. And I'm wondering, did your communication outlets change? Did your messaging change? How did you approach communication different once COVID happened as opposed to prior?
Well, thanks. Thanks for asking that. Well, yeah, we did change our communication approach and style. Clearly, in the past, we had lots of face-to-face communications, meeting, industry groups, conventions, you know, whether it's a chamber board meeting, WMC board meeting. So clearly our whole communication approach and being more electronic. Now, for baby boomers like me, that was a little bit maybe more of a challenge to be effective and be able to use the tools. So we had people level set on that. Also, we went from being 100% in the office. If you think of our workforce, we're very traditional. We didn't have a lot of remote work. And within a week, we had mobilized our VPNs. We had mobilized policies on remote work, made sure we provisioned our employees. And I have to just give them all credit. They were flexible, agile, and within a week, the administrative employees were working from home. So we've had to adjust that. I used to have a Riverside chat face-to-face with employees. I miss that. And now I do a weekly video, which I do by myself. I used to have great staff to help me do videos. Now I'm doing it myself. And of course, all the remote meetings, and then the meetings with the members a little bit more challenged as you do it. So we're finding that we have to have more touch points and just really stay active and intentional about communicating. So let me pause. Did I answer your question?
You did, yes. We have a question which is actually similar to what I was going to ask. The time frame and process that you use to create your continuity and pandemic plan. Has this always been in place? Did you add a pandemic component onto your plan?
So a couple things, two parts to this. We had a pandemic plan, as I think most larger businesses did. And I believe that was during the SARS outbreak in 2008-ish. I'm remembering my dates. So that had been there. And when we heard the early warnings of the coronavirus, we started taking steps to update our pandemic plan. But as the news on California and New York hit, we thought we have to really ramp up our efforts. And while our pandemic plan addresses some of this, it doesn't give us all the details that we need to do. So we were able to quickly pivot, because in our industry, we're also required to have what we call our business continuity plan. And we do regular testing of, just like fire departments and first responders would do. We do regular testing of incident command. So we were able to invoke our business continuity plan with the structure we have in place. We did that on a Monday morning after working over the weekend with some of the key leadership and key staff. And on Monday, that same day, we raised our pandemic plan to medium. It put our business continuity plan in place, which is a whole different governance structure, which really has our business continuity coordinators like the general. And so we've been able to move very quickly because we consolidated what used to be a very larger company into our business continuity plan. And then we started rocking and rolling, moved very quickly. Within a week, we had the people working remote, and then it was within 2 to 3 weeks that we had our contingency planning for our sequestration and crews. And now we're working on our plan for a return to work in a measured, prudent way, given the phases that we have in the Badger bounce back and the Trump administration opening up America again. So does that address your question?
Absolutely. It sounded like you had to do some because the California, really Washington, that didn't happen that much longer or ahead of us. So you still had to do some pretty fine tuning to your plan, with pretty short notice.
Oh, it was, when I say pivot, it was a 180. We had to really ramp it up. Yes.
One of the things you touched on was the industry mutual aid, and I'm sure this existed. I don't know if it was required before this, but essentially, my interpretation of that is, what's the greater good here, right? So you give the example of, we have to get power to our healthcare facilities, and if we can't do it, you created those relationships in terms of how do you still put out a product, if you think about it in a manufacturing way. You created those relationships far in advance to create that continuity. Is that a requirement? Is that just best practices with co-ops? How did that come about?
So, Vicki, this is a industry standard practice, and it's not just with cooperatives, it's with municipals and with investor-owned utilities. So as an example, when Hurricane Katrina came, or Sandy, mutual aid programs were invoked, and crews and individuals from all across the country, utilities from all across, co-ops, municipals, investor-owned, they all went to the aid of those regions. And so that's been a long-standing industry practice. And the challenge is now, should there ever be a natural disaster and a healthcare disaster, in the past, you'd usually have crews available in different regions, but this then puts challenges on your staffing or your resources, if you will.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times when you hear of mutual aid, you think of fire and police. You don't necessarily think of utilities. So you added another aspect onto mutual aid there. The other piece that I found interesting was the cybersecurity piece. So cybersecurity for you is always a concern, but now there's an added factor of you have people remote working, so that creates more vulnerability to your security system, I would imagine. Did the aspect of remote working and having that many access points, did that cause some complications in your plan as well?
Excellent question. So if you think about our business in two separate parts, one we would call our mission critical, we call it our operations, and the other might be our administration or business. They are on separate servers. So for that very reason, because of the many points of contact, we isolate our systems so that, while we want to make sure that we don't, we're all subject to increased phishing given this environment, and we're only as strong as the weakest link, we have a whole separate firewall and separate servers for what our system operating and for our mission critical. So that's one level of protection. And then we also have increased vulnerability monitoring, as well as continued communication, so that if anyone sees some kind of hack, we're all watching for that, and that we can get out ahead of it and share that information.
So really that department went into overdrive, so to speak. They had multiple aspects they had to take a look at.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead, yeah. Any other questions from the group? Otherwise, I know, Barb, one of the things that is always talked about is renewable energy and how that helps provide some consistency. So again, people, you can add questions into the chat there, but Barb, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'd love to, because You know, even as we are focused on surviving, if you will, we still need to thrive and think about the future and what we want to be on the other side of this. And that's kind of the challenge, is just make it through the day and think purposefully about what we want to be. Well, at Dairyland, you know, talked about our sustainability initiative, and we want to, while keeping the lights on, we want to make sure that every day we're moving towards being more and more sustainable. So let me show you a picture, if you don't mind, because I did put this in my deck thinking folks might ask the question, and it's hard to explain without a picture. So this shows you, MISO is an acronym for the Midwest Independent System Operator. So if you think of it as like a huge swath from like all through the Midwest up to Canada down to the Gulf, of the electric interconnected systems, all the people, all the factories. And this shows the usage. So I showed you the usage before. This blue line, this shows you in the polar vortex of 2019 what load was, usage. And this is by day. So you see here along the x-axis, the day, the time of day. And then you see along the y-axis, this vertical axis, you see what the load was. And there's a bifurcation here because of the scale. You want to be able to see it. So what we're trying to demonstrate here is that, you know, on this day of and I don't have my glasses on or I to read you the date. You can see how wind is up at its normal course, and you can see the temperatures. So at 3 o'clock, when it's gets to be very cold, the wind dropped off precipitously. You can see 80%, and it stayed down at very low levels. Now, at the lowest level of the wind that you see here on this day, 7 p.m., when it was minus 18, the load is the highest. I'm going to just flip one and show you the same day this year, not severe weather, but again, here's our load, here's wind. Wind was not available at kind of the peak load times. Even though it's not as peaky, it's not there. So when you hear phrases like, we're working on our renewable enabling natural gas, or we want to be cautious about our transition to a new world, we want to make sure that there's enough what we call base load so that we can keep the power flowing and lights on as we make sure that there's these wind and solar called intermittent, that we can respond to the intermittent nature of the other types of renewable resources. So until we have the answers with batteries or the answers to how we have load be more responsive, we probably will continue to see some base load, some coal, and probably a growing number of some natural gas units, again, to ensure reliability. So that's, I just thought, as we think of the future, that's, Vicki, what we want to make sure we do is find that balance.
I hope I'm not throwing you a zinger here, but obviously we've heard about oil being phenomenally low right now. How does that impact you guys from an energy provider standpoint?
So for us, as a user of natural gas, you know, which you use in combustion turbines and combined cycle, natural gas is an all-time low. If you think of, let me give you some bandwidth so you have a sense of frame of reference. During Katrina, natural gas prices went up to $15. Normal projections would be natural gas over the long term would range from $4 to $8. We are seeing prices between like $1.50 and $2.50. So when you think of the the cost of our raw material, and our raw material would be the power we buy in the MISO, Midwest Independent System Operator market, it's very low. So for us, the very depressed pricing is offsetting the decreased sales. So that's good news for our customers and members. While it's not good news for, obviously, for oil producers and explorers, but what this could mean in the long term, there won't be the supply and demand, and then you see things changing. But that's how it is today. And I can go into more detail, but that's probably all you want for today.
No, that's fantastic. So I'm not seeing any questions from the viewers here, if we're going to call them that. This has been fascinating. It's always great to get insight into how other industries operate, but particularly as you have always said in here, pivoting, right? So COVID happened. How do businesses pivot? How do you continue to ensure that there's strong communication, that you're protecting your workforce, that you're providing consistency with your customers? And so greatly appreciate you coming onto our chamber chat here, Barb, and look forward to interacting with you in the future.
Great.
Thank you all for joining us. Yep.
Yeah, thank you all. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.